I like fun models far more than any gaming piece. Spending a few hours making a model for no other reason than a pun is worth far more effort than a tiddlywink with delusions of grandeur. Well, I'm not the only one, and these downloadable STLs are for Regimental Dogs by Limkos. As I understand it, this started with a D&D pack dog, which got remixed with a Cadian helmet, and once that proved popular, Limkos made a few other versions. After a little poll to find out which one should come next, naturally the Tanith won, and suddenly I'm interested. Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and I'll be painting a few of these Regimental Dogs today. After getting my printer to do its work, I had a look at the 3 that I wanted to make. Unfortunately, the supports for codecs here weren't so great, or more specifically the raft, which had overcured and fused the raft into some of the pores and making them break off. The Drop Troops pug came out great, however, and I particularly wanted to make one of these as I interviewed some of the people behind the Drop Troops fan codex for Imperial Guard on Back to the Brush podcast. After checking the print, the pug fit nicely on a 25mm base. But as you might expect, the Tanith Wolfhound is by far the most interesting for me. Of the several options that exist, I chose the one with the straight silver held purposefully in their jaw. And if what I've seen from other people's printing, this is certainly the most popular of the Tanith options. The cloak has a great shape, and pouches underneath make for an interesting model to paint. But just before I paint it, I'll add a little bit of quick texture to the bases. The Drop Troops pug got a mix of sand and baking powder just to break up the otherwise boring flat base. For my Tanith, honestly much the same, but with some added rocks. The Wolfhound is a little larger than the pug, and so this is a 32mm base. Starting painting for both of these models is very much the same as any other model. Base coats. Many hobbies have a technical side, and that technical side will always have some fundamental skills. In mini painting, one of those is base coating. Clearly for the Wolfhound, the cloak needed a green base coat to match the cloaks for my Gaunt's Ghost Army, and the colour of the fur coat was pretty easy as well. Wolfhounds are often dark grey or black, and that matches my Tanith uniform quite nicely. For the Drop Pug, my choices are way more open. I don't have any Elysians or Drop Troop Guard or any similar science fiction model, so I have free rein to paint this any colour I feel. As you can see, I chose red for the armour and equipment, but really I couldn't tell you why. Maybe I haven't painted enough red recently, or maybe this was just the closest pot to me. With the base coat sorted, I had the main task for these models, and that is creating texture and emphasising the sculpts. As with a very small version of anything, you can very easily lose detail. Shapes become too small to differentiate, and edges meld into surfaces. The sculpts for these models do an excellent job of emphasising some of that detail, but now it's my job to paint it and do the sculpt justice. For the Wolfhound's fur, I striped in large streaks of a charcoal black over the grey, which will be the basis for my fur texture. I'm not trying to paint in every strand of fur here, I just need to give a general idea of the direction of the hair. The next layer is much smaller streaks of a very light grey. I'm not aiming these specifically over the black streaks, I'm allowing them to sit in the middle, or on the side, or in between the previous shapes. What I did try was to put a few more of these lighter streaks on the top surfaces, the roll of the shoulder and the snout, to act as an impromptu highlight. I felt at this point that my fur texture has far too strong divisions between the colours, and so to smooth that out, to create at least somewhat of a gradient, I glazed over the whole thing with a black-brown mix, which darkened a lot of the lighter greys and tied them together and added just that tiniest hint of warmth into the otherwise cold fur. The Drop Pug got a slightly different treatment. Most of this model is the armour and equipment, with only a touch of fur visible, and so I put my effort here into defining the shapes of the kit as best I could. And whilst I did some simple highlights in the red, the real work of this was panel lining. With some of the same charcoal black still on my wet palette, I carefully glazed in the recesses of most of the lines in the model. The lines of the armour, the grav chute and the visor. And after that I mixed up a light grey with the red to create a edge highlight colour. Essentially, being the matched detail to panel lining, the edge highlight dealt with the raised corners where the panel lines had dealt with the recessed corners. To use up some of the grey off the wet palette, I painted the visor with quite a cartoony reflective effect. It's a long way from a proper reflective paint style or a non-metallic metal, but it is a characterful cartoony style. And most importantly, this gave Red Cuffs the inspiration to name my Drop Troops regiment the Rusty Razors. With most of the work done now on the main colour sections, the last few bits of detail can be filled in. The Tanith Wolfhound gets some simple silver and my now well practiced camo pattern. This good doggo is going to sit nicely amongst my Tanith models and probably won't stand out, well, other than being a quadruped. With most of the drop pug also detailed, I just needed to finish the fur. Unfortunately, with my other screen in frame here, the auto white balance has killed the detail. I tried my best in the edit, but sorry about that. The tan fur with a little dark brown for the snout and eyes is pretty much it. Nice simple shapes with just the barest hint of a highlight. After only a little extra cleanup and details here and there, I'm happy to call these models complete. I'm also happy with how these came out. Not perfect, partly due to my low-res printer, but the silhouettes are distinct and the details are visible. Whilst I have no drop troops to keep the pug company, I'm sure I can squeeze them into a science fiction RPG at some point, alongside a ragtag crew with a shuttle type game. The Wolfhound, however, fits nicely into my Gaunt's Ghosts army and will make quite a few friends, I'm sure. I wonder what would be the best way to somehow squeeze these into a game. What do you lot think about these? As a not for gaming mascot model or as a playable piece with custom rules? Well, on your way to the comments section to discuss that, in the description there are links to Limkos downloads so you can see the variety and maybe buy a few for yourself. There's also my standard links for the stuff that I get up to, but with that said, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.